Rich Shea here with another unboxing. This time, Viscounts, I think it's Viscounts or Vicomte in French, of the West Kingdom. The third, and maybe final, if it's a trilogy, of Shem Phillips and S.J. Macdonald's West Kingdom games. Published by Renegade Games. And let's take a look. Okay, it's in a relatively small box. The artwork, there's an ad. The instructions, glossy cover. Let's see if we can keep it centered. Right, okay. Glossy pages, large graphics, score points. You have your Viscount component, inkwells, gold, stone, and manuscripts, start player marker. There's this interesting round thing, and it's sort of a roundel map thing. For the players, you're going to have 3 of your people out at one time and use their capabilities to combo to make moves. Okay, so there are neutral townsfolk card, hero townsfolk cards. I think you get one of those, and starting townsfolk card, and each player gets a starting deck. There are 4 cleric bonus cards. Who's ever the leader in building castles gets this bonus card. Poverty and prosperity, which have to do with how the game ends and end game bonus points. Player cards, which I think get comboed with the hero cards to determine your starting thing. There's scheme cards and reference cards for the AI player, some multipliers in case you run out of stuff. 30 debt cards. Debts are something you can acquire and pay off. And 30 deed cards, which represent property you can acquire and then get approval and get more bonus points for it. So you set up the game by making this roundel, and you put this middle thing in it. Your workers are going to end up in this tray. There's your workers, 20 workers. And there are manuscripts, starting townspeople. You're going to, as in the other games in this series, if you've seen them, your player board is going to be covered with buildings, 3 trading posts, 3 guild halls, 3 workshops, and as you build them, you'll uncover bonuses, capabilities, and also you'll score points at the end of the game for how many of each kind you get off. A very interesting concept is you have a corruption marker and a virtue marker, and as you do things, they're going to move towards each other and eventually collide, which will trigger an event. At the same time, you have your workers will come out here 1 per turn and slide across and then slide off. Shuffle them up. You pair the starter things and the town hero cards up randomly and then have a draft. You'll put prosperity and deed cards out depending on the number of players, and there'll be more underneath, but when either of those stacks runs out, it triggers the end of the game. So there are debts and deeds that you can flip them over. That's paying off a debt. Flipping a deed shows that you got approval and you're like developing or whatever. And then you could flip, you could get a choice of flips. So then virtue, corruption, and criminals. Criminals are sort of wild characters for certain capabilities, but when you use them, you get corruption. When you perform certain things or play other players, you might gain virtue. Criminals are wild. They can represent any of the other 4 business capabilities, and when they collide, it's going to be resolved, and that'll get explained. So townsfolk have a cost to hire, icons that they have when you use them. Sometimes they'll have an immediate effect when you hire them, and sometimes the cards will have an ability when you play the game. So you manage your cards, you move your Viscount on the circular track, then you take a primary action. Okay, you may recruit another townsperson. If there's a collision, you resolve it, and then you draw your hand back up to the correct size. that's basically how the whole game's played. Card management is you basically slide your townsfolk down one every turn, and when they come off the end, some townsfolk actually have a capability that's triggered when they come off, some when they come on, and then they have markers on them that represent ability, the costs you'll need to pay to do certain actions. So you move the cards along, then you move your Viscount. I think they always move clockwise, and the card that you played, let's say that's a 3, that's how far you have to move. All right? The distance they must move equal to the silver value of the top left of the townsfolk card they played, and you can't move fewer, but you can pay more silver to move further. And there's an inner track, I believe, and an outer track, and where you end up determines what action your Viscount takes. And then the action is supported by the townspeople you have out. Okay, so the primary actions are you can trade, construct one of the buildings off your board, place workers into the castle, or try to get a manuscript. Okay. Trade is on the outside path, and do you spend silver? And you might get something. You can either spend silver to get gold, to get other resources you might need, or to thin your deck out by destroying the townsfolk card. You might, if you have enough of them, you can flip a debt or deed for every 4 tokens that merchant tokens that you have, if that's the kind of thing you're doing. Constructing a building, you'll need 3 for workshop, 5 for trading post, 7 for a guild hall. There are points at the end for having constructed some of them. There are building spots on the board. They give you a resource when you build it, and if two buildings are in connected spaces, the middle thing happens for either once for the player who owns both of them, or once each for the 2 players who own the 2 different ones. Okay, and then when the buildings uncover different capabilities or resources, placing workers, I don't think I'm going to go into that. What happens is you start at the outer track. When you have 3 of your workers in a spot, one goes clockwise, one goes counterclockwise, and one moves in, which has the possibility of triggering another set of 3 workers, and you keep doing it until that's all done. Then some workers might have to be removed from here, but one of the goals is when you move workers, you get effects. When they get to the center, you get a resource. Once they're in the center, then I don't think bad things can happen to them anymore. And there's endgame scoring. And somebody will be the lead on the castle track, which is worth 5 points. And I think it increases your hand size by 1. So players take turns. Okay. Oh, and the last thing is transcribing manuscripts, which requires a collection of inkwells and either cleric or criminal icons. Inkwells are what you spend to get them. The icons are what qualifies you to get certain kinds of them. And being able to do that depends on moving on the inner track of the roundel with your Viscount. And then you can recruit, when you finish your primary actions, you may hire the face-up townsfolk card next to where your Viscount is on the main board. If you can afford it, it's usually a matter of silver. Then it goes into your discard pile. That's how you make your deck better, mostly. And then if a collision happens, you resolve them. There might be a bonus for everybody who has no criminals on their board and has built their second workshop. Okay. There are some townsfolk have things that they do when there's a collision. Okay. And then the current player gets some items depending on where the collision occurs. The current player gets something, which could be property, could be debt. Okay. And also all opposing players get things printed underneath. Okay. And then you draw your hand back up, and the game goes until one of the stacks of debt or property cards runs out, and then you finish the round, and then one final round. So it is totally possible to have both the debts and the property cards run out before the end of the game, in which case both endgame bonuses score, both the poverty and prosperity one. And it's based on, if it's poverty time, then people who bought property to hide in during the dark days that are coming get points based on who has the most. If it's prosperity time, then people who invested in the town by assuming and paying off debt get victory points based on who's in the lead on those things. And potentially both things happen, and both endgame things score. Then there's a scoring example. Then there are some solo rules. So there's a solo version of the game with set up general rules, how your imaginary opponent works, and how the primary actions are different. Okay, and then an example of an AI turn, an endgame scoring for the solo, and then on the back a reference sheet. The rules seem fairly well written and pretty clear. Now let's look at the components. This is the inside of the castle thing. It will sit in the middle of the board, and then it has the outer, middle, and inner tracks. There are cardboard inserts that go in to show the things that happen when you move into those spaces or get 3 in the spaces. There are the wooden components, plastic bags, and the wooden components, each player will get a virtue and vice marker, and these are the inkwells. Let me get one of those out. The components are, cut out wooden things. They're pretty nice. Each, this will be gold. Each player has their own markers. Here's the Viscount, workers, one kind of building, another kind of building, and then there's a third kind in there somewhere. And that's red, green. I believe this is a stone. Yellow. And blue. There are 2 sizes of cards. These cards appear to be debt card, property cards. That's approved deed, and that's not approved yet. Still worth a victory point, worth 3 when you flip it. Debt, when you take it on, I think you get a resource. When you pay it off, it's worth 2 victory points. Oh no, it's worth minus 2 victory points when you get it. When you pay it off, I think you get a resource. And of course, now it's not worth negative 2 victory points. Then there's the, in case you need multipliers, the X10 multipliers, and it's X5 on the other side. Then there are these cards, these are the Cleric Cards, which are acquired when you reach certain clerical levels, and that's the who's ever in the lead with castles card. Those are the small cards. There's also a deck of large cards, and this is often the case. I'll have to struggle to get this open. So that's the poverty card, the prosperity card. And then the rest of the cards are the the townsfolk that you can hire to expand your deck. Did I get the other ones? Let's just cut this out. So the player's starting asymmetric starting resources, and then you flip them over and it shows the way the actions work. The AI deck, it's actually 2 small decks. The hero cards, everybody will start with one of them. They're more powerful than regular townsfolk. That'll combine with the asymmetric Viscounts to make different starting combinations all the time. And then each player's starting deck: an abbot, financier, journeyman, laborer, lender, squire, a thief. Everybody needs a thief in there. And a trader. And there's 4 sets of those. The cardboard components, I guess I'll just dump them out. Well, we'll start from the bottom. The player decks, I think this is what the AI uses, and this is what the normal players use. So your virtue and vice things move along here, your buildings come off here, and your player cards come here. At the beginning of the game, you have some symbols showing until they're covered up, because you're only going to bring 1 card out at the start, and then it will move across each turn. The player decks are identical. The cardboard is reasonable, not super thick. It has there's a bunch of coins. First player marker. I think this goes in the center of the castle. These are the manuscripts. And then the others, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think are the, each of these are the, make up the rondel, which has one side for 1 to 3 players and another side for 4 or 5 players. Okay, then there are extra pieces that go into the castle, some more coins, and some more manuscripts. I think these are, these are special starting manuscripts. They go on the top of each stack. They're probably somewhat easier to obtain. And these are, well, single coins. So, yes. And so there are the 5 of these. And that's all the components. I'm looking forward to try it, probably solo mode first. It has a lot of interesting things in it. And kind of different set of mechanics than many other games. Very nice production. I like the art. Not necessarily the faces on the people. They're kind of ugly, but you know, things are falling apart. We're about to have some dark ages, and I guess people just couldn't keep up appearances. So thanks for watching, and as you know, one of the other things I'm involved in is the Meeple League at meepleleague.com, where we try to encourage competitive board gaming, both in live events, and also we have online gaming. Feel free to join. Our online leagues are nice. You start at the bottom and you could work your way up. After a couple of seasons, you'll mostly be playing against people at about your skill level, which I think is more fun. If you're a super hyper competitive person, well, I guess that could be fun too. But if you like playing against people at your own level, this league system works quite well, I believe. So, again, thanks for watching. Look forward to seeing you soon.